This video is brought to you by the 3-Minute Board Game patrons. Keep us independent by supporting us on Patreon. Kia ora koutou and welcome to this review of the Dream Eaters expansion for Arkham Horror, the card game. Now this is part of an ongoing series of reviews of the campaigns for Arkham Horror that I've been doing. And these reviews are really split into two sections. A spoiler-free section at the start, where I talk about overall themes, what the mechanics of the campaign are, and whether it would be a good fit for new players or not. And then the second part, where I break down each of the scenarios and why I did or did not enjoy them particularly much. So, will be clear signposts to say, this is the spoiler-free bit at the start, and this is the spoilery bit towards the end. Let's start off with, what's the hook for the Dream Eaters? Have you ever wondered what it would be like to be in control of your dreams? To be able to fly yourself through vast worlds full of whimsy, grandeur, and terror. In the Dream Eaters, you will play two groups of investigators. The first group cannot wake up and is trapped in the Dreamlands. They seek to return to the land of the living, but they must first explore countless worlds of myth and fable. The second group is in the waking world and is trying to figure out what has happened to their friends. Can they wake them from this side, or do they need to go in and pull them out? Now, the first thing to note about the Dream Eaters is that it has an unusual campaign structure. You're supposed to have two teams of investigators, each working each side of the campaign, and each side of the campaign only has 4 scenarios. Now that brings with it some inherent flexibility, as you can play each campaign independently of each other. They do not need to be played as a pair. Many people do play them as a pair, in which case you'll need to construct a character for each of the campaigns. And you might have to swap cards back and forth between them if you're playing similar characters or have a small pool of cards. Alternatively, you can just play each 4 scenario campaign by itself, and that gives this campaign box quite a bit of flexibility. Another good thing to note about this campaign is it returns 2 keywords I really like, and those are veiled and hidden. And we'll go into that in more detail a bit later, but I love to see mechanics being reused in a good way. Sometimes the Arkham Horror campaigns will introduce something cool, and then you'll never see it again, and it's slightly annoying because you're like, that was really cool, maybe you could explore that in a different way connected to another campaign mechanic. But sometimes they just let things go by the wayside. So it was really good to see Veiled and Hidden come back here. The other thing I'll praise about the Dream Eaters is that the finales are very interesting. Now, they're not without their problems, but they're interesting and stylistic at least. And the first time you play each finale, you'll be quite captivated by them, because they are very neat. I'll talk about each scenario in more detail and what I found challenging about them later on in the spoiler section in the video. But the non-spoiler plus here is that the finales are very cool. Now, I just want to make a note about the Dreamlands and a lot of the setting material in this book. So Lovecraft really wrote 2 main styles of things. He had his horror and he had his flights of whimsy stories. In his own words, he said, I have my Poe stories and my Dunsany stories, but where are the Lovecraft stories? This is something of an issue I've had with Arkham Files games before and just Call of Cthulhu and the whole Arkhamverse in general, is they try to lump all of Lovecraft's writings into one big Milo, and sometimes it just doesn't quite work. There's big tonal differences between the Dreamland stuff and the sort of Cthulhu stuff, if you would. Now, of course, the writings and stuff cross-pollinate and ideas go back and forth, but the same world that has unspeakable black horrors also has talking cats and Nodens and other sort of flights of fancy and weirdness. But it's not necessarily as straight up horror as you might be used to from something like Innsmouth or Carcosa. So this is kind of a plus or a negative. Some people love the Dreamland stuff. That's their favorite thing in all of Lovecraft's creations, all of the Dreamland stuff. That for them, that's peak Lovecraft. And that's fine. But if you're not one of those people, some of the content in here could be a little for you. So the things I didn't find particularly great about the campaign are the campaign linkages and how the campaign is structured as a linked 8 scenario campaign. Like as 4 scenario campaigns, I found it fine, but I was expecting way more back and forth and sharing of information and cards and things going back between these 2 scenarios. And there's a tiny bit of it, but it's barely noticeable. You can easily play them as independent scenarios and not miss a damn thing about having the crossover. And I feel that's a bit of a missed opportunity in some ways. I was expecting so much more interaction between our characters than what we got. And now that's probably on me for expecting a little bit too much from what I thought was going to be a quite linked campaign. But I'm sure there's other people who've gone into the Dream Eaters thinking, oh, there's going to be heaps and back and forth between our parties. How cool is that? And it just isn't there. So think of them as 2 4-scenario campaigns that are played in parallel. And if you're playing them as an 8-scenario campaign, they will touch occasionally, but they're not hugely linked. Another thing I found is a lot of the scenarios, especially on the Dream Quest side, depend on a lot of, hey, it's this thing from the Dreamlands. It's this thing from the Dreamlands. Hey, remember these 2 characters? They're going to say their lines. They say the lines from the book. You can do the things and they say the lines from the book, and then you go down the path. That's in the book. It's a lot of, hey, check out this, check out that, without having much depth to it. It's not like it's reimagining the material, it's just going over the material. So if you've read the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, and the first 5 or 6 pages of that story are literally the first scenario of the Dream Quest side of the campaign, almost word for word, bit for bit. And I get, use the source material, but they cleave too closely to the source material at sometimes here. And it just seems to be a lot of sightseeing of things from the Dream Quest without really having any depth to it. It's like a sort of bad Star Wars thing where they're like, hey, remember that character, he was in the cantina. It's a little bit like that, and it irked me a bit. And the last thing I didn't find particularly great about the campaign is there's a lot of sort of dull scenarios in it. At least half the scenarios in the campaign, I would say, are average or passable. And the finales are interesting, but the lead up to them, there's a lot of go here, get the clues off this card, that unlocks another card or 2, go to that one, do that, repeat sort of scenarios in this campaign. A lot of uninspiring and sort of uninteresting design, except for those finales. So there's at least one non-finale scenario on each side that's pretty good, but then there's 2 scenarios on each side that are sort of, yeah. So while the finale's a thriller, the rest of it is a lot of filler. Right, so who is the Dream Eaters for? I don't think this is a particularly good one for new players, especially not having to make 2 decks if you're playing all 8 scenarios. That's a big burden on new players. I do think having the 4 scenario campaigns, that's cool. That's a good thing to have in your toolbox because you don't always want to play a full 8 scenario campaign. Sometimes you just want to test out a character or play it through 4 scenarios and get to one of these cool finales and see if you can crack it. And that's what I think the Dream Eaters is best at, as a 2-pack of 4 scenarios, not as a 1-pack of 8 scenarios. And overall, I'd say that the Dream Quest campaign is the weaker of the 2 and the Web of Dreams is a little bit better. But as an overall whole, it's one of my least favorite campaigns to date. Next up, we're going to talk about the mechanics in the campaign. And the first of those I want to talk about is Hidden. Now, Hidden pops up occasionally in the campaign, and Hidden is one of my favorite keywords in all of Arkham Horror. It first pops up in Carcosa, and what it is it's cards that go into your hand that you can't talk about. You can't reference, and you have to do things as described on the card. They brought it back here, and this is one of my favorite little things in Arkham because it messes with people. It makes you do things that appear to be non-optimal to the rest of the crew, especially the first time through. So you're sitting there going, oh, can't contribute to that test. Everyone's just looking at you filthy like, really need like an extra skill card. You're like, not doing that. And it's all because you've got a hidden card in your hand. Now, Hidden's used in a really intriguing way in one of the finales, but I'll talk about that when I get to that scenario. All I'll say is, I love seeing Hidden back. I'd almost like to see Hidden in just about every campaign, but that might overcook it. But it is one of the fun, best, coolest things Arkham's ever done. Next up is Veiled. Now, Veiled is a mechanic that's also from Carcosa, and it's where you place down locations revealed to start with, and they have all their clues on them. And when you clear them with clues or throw another trigger, you flip over the card and you read a story text on the back that resolves something. And Veiled cards are used really well in one of the scenarios in this campaign. And they're another thing I think campaigns should use more of. I think the Veiled card system's really cool. You don't want to overuse it because you want people to, explore locations normally for most of the game, but having the odd Veiled scenario there that triggers and flips over and does something cool once it's revealed, that's really neat. And that feels like Veiled and Hidden, they feel like they should be part of the standard toolkit for Arkham Horror the campaign. They shouldn't be campaign-specific mechanics. They should be just something that the designers feel like they can throw into any campaign at any point. Just a scenario here and there, but it should be part of the core rule set. Because I'd like to see Veiled pop up quite a bit. Don't overdo it. Don't put it in every scenario. If there's a scenario with a Veiled card in every campaign, I probably wouldn't complain. And the final unique mechanic for this campaign is swarming. So how swarming works is that you have a creature, a card, like a normal encounter card creature, and then you place extra cards behind it to represent multiple copies of them. And swarming cards tend to be able to get more copies of them. So you end up with, say, a spider at the front, and then it'll be essentially 5 spiders tucked behind it. And each of those spiders moves and attacks. And that can be quite horrific. The problem is I find it very fiddly. I don't like putting cards from the player decks behind the swarming cards. I think this would have been much better if it just had things put on top of it. If you just put resources on it to show how it was done, because putting your cards out there and then moving around and killing them and remembering to put your card back under your deck, it's just needless busy work. And I think it was to try and take some cards out of your deck, but it's not that big a deal. It's just fiddly. Yeah, swarming, I'm not sure I'm a big fan of it. It does make evade a little bit better, because if you evade the front enemy, you evade the whole stack. But it really does reward you having cards like Stir the Pot or Storm of Storms? Dynamite. the ones that allow you to target every critter in an area, because you can just use one of those to melt an entire big stack. So yeah, it's one of those things that it looks like it's a cool mechanic. When you play it, it's a little bit fiddly, and it just steers you towards getting certain cards that really hard counter it. Any card that does damage to anything in a stack is just swarming repellent. Not sure I'd want to see that one come back. Or if it does, it should be used sparingly, so you can't tool up for it. Because in the Web of Dreams side, just about every scenario has swarming in it. So yeah, you just tool up for it. So concludes the spoiler light section of the review. We're going to move on to the spoiler heavy section, which is talking about each of the scenarios in turn. And we're going to alternate back and forth between the campaigns, and we're going to start off with the Dream Quest and the very first Dream Quest scenario. So the first scenario on the Dream Quest is Beyond the Gates of Sleep, and I do not care for this scenario at all. It starts off putting you through all these gates. You encounter 2 characters from the story, you have to beat their challenges, then you end up on a staircase and you have to get all the clues and go all the way down the stairs, and then you basically get to the actual scenario about halfway through. And as you're descending down the stairs, all of the mechanics are get rid of your cards, get rid of your cards. So you're like, okay. If you know the trick, you power up and then you move down once you're fully equipped, because you've got this massive Doom track. And then you're in the scenario proper, which is the second half of the scenario. And that's a central location with a bunch of locations around the side, and you just bounce back and forth. It's very ordinary, very average scenario, and the first time you go through it, you're like, oh, cool, this is like quite story rich. But then on repeat plays, you're like, oh, can I press the skip forward button till we're at the final circuit, and I'll do that. Plus, there's this very weird thing where you're told, do not stray from the path. And if you don't stray from the path, you stay in the central location and do the task required there. It's this weird thing where the scenario sort of tells you to do this repetitive task that doesn't get you anywhere. And you really have to step off the path and break the rules to actually do the scenario. I don't know if you can actually win it without straying from the path, but it was a weird little metagamey thing to put in there, and I don't particularly care for it. Whereas on the other side, Waking Nightmare, the very first one from the Web of Dreams, now this is a good scenario. This is a very good scenario. It has this cool mechanic where you've got sort of swarms popping up and they corrupt locations. So as you're moving through, the corruption starts spreading, and you've got to work your way all the way down to the end of the hospital, find this guy and convince him to come with you. And once you do, you can start removing the blight. So you've got the whole expanding pandemic style, but then you get the cure, and you've got to race to sort of block all these locations and finish the game off that way. This is cool. Like, this feels tense. It's on a timer. There's some really cool enemies in it. They're orderlies, these orderly enemies that follow you around for the first half and just keep an eye on you, and you're like, you're suspicious, and then halfway through the game, spiders burst out of their face. And that's peak horror. There's some really vicious enemies in here as well. Some of the big spider enemies are nasty. And swarming feels appropriate here. Like, all of these spiders coming in, if you're not kitted out for dealing with swarming, they're pretty terrifying. And yeah, overall vibe of this scenario is really cool. It's got some exploration. It's got a crescendo as the blight spreads through the hospital, and then you've got that fight back period where you're trying to sort of seal all the breaches. And I think this is a top tier scenario, probably the best actual scenario in the whole of Dream Eaters. Back to the other side, and we have the search for Kadath. And this is quite a cool scenario. This is my other one that isn't a finale that I quite like. But it does have, again, this preamble. You have this section where you've got to do this very basic thing to get to a port. And it just takes up a couple of turns, and it feels like a filler. It just feels like a waste, just to sort of showcase, here's some of the characters. Remember those characters? Yeah, here they are again. And once you're through that, you get this fascinating option of being able to set sail north, south, east, and west. And there are 4 sort of mini scenarios that you can do. And you'll probably get through 2. If you are very good, you'll get through 3. And I imagine it's possible to get through 4, but I've never been able to do it myself. I got most of the way through 3. That's as well as I've done. And each of these different locations has its own little story to tell. They're reasonably linear, but that doesn't feel so bad when there's 4 of them and you can visit them in any order you want. And yeah, each of them just showcases a little bit of history from the Dreamlands, a little bit of story, talks about the beings from Ib and the doom that came to Sarnath and all these stuff from the Dreamlands. And that's cool. It's what we call a tiki tour. You go to all the different sites and you take some photos and you move on to the next site, especially if you've got Daryl on your team. You're taking a lot of photos of these sites. It's tourism for the Dreamlands. But because you never get to see all of it in one play, it'll be very rare for you to get to see all of it in one play, it still feels fresh when you come back to it. It doesn't feel like you're just going point by point by point by point, even though each of the little segments is on rails itself for the most part. I like the search for Kadath. I like the challenge it presents. You've got to get these signs, and I think you can get up to maybe 10 or 12 signs, and getting 6 or 7, all right. So setting yourself the challenge of how many of these signs can I get in one playthrough, and then try to do better next time, that's good Arkham scenario design. The search for Kadath is a very good scenario as well. And at this stage of the campaign, I was kind of going, oh yeah, this is okay. I'm not really seeing much back and forth, but we've played 3 scenarios and 2 of them are bangers, so, what could go wrong?
But there is no escape.
I think we're safe now.
From H.P. Lovecraft's The Unnameable.
And then we come to 1,000 Shapes of Horror, which is a pretty awful scenario. One of the weird things about 1,000 Shapes of Horror in a campaign about spiders is you think there'd be tons of spiders, but this scenario just doesn't feel like it belongs in this campaign. It feels like it's lifted from another campaign and just dropped here. It's almost traditional search the house, haunted house, looking for clues, piece together those clues, and then get out sort of scenario. The thing is, there is a baddie inside, and it's an unkillable baddie. And unlike the unkillable baddie from the Circle Undone, this one's really awful. Like, I can deal with the unkillable baddie in the Circle Undone, but the one in the Unnameable, the 1,000 Shapes of Horror, which is the Unnameable, it just has a whole bunch of dirty tricks, and you have to do tests, and it just does damage to you. Now, if you were just dealing with it inside the house, that probably wouldn't be that big a deal. But this scenario has a coda, and it's an annoying coda, because you do all the haunted house stuff, and you escape, and you think you're doing all right. And then you have to go on this very long path to the Dreamlands proper. And it's a set of locations on top of each other, and you sort of keep moving down the path. But there's a whole bunch of cards in the encounter deck that move you back up. And if you're on the same level as the Unnameable, it does damage to you, and it keeps doing stuff and pulling you back. It's like you're stuck running on a treadmill It's a very frustrating end to the scenario because you can't defeat the unnameable, and a lot of the time the encounter deck just goes, yeah, well, go back 20 spaces, lose your turn, and you get hit for 2 damage and 2 horror. And we're going to do that to you again next turn. Can you get ahead 5 spaces? Just feels, it's just kind of a shitty scenario in a few ways. I don't hate it, but it's a bit of a downer from the previous ones. I'd rather the Doom Clock was just shorter and they didn't have the ramp, to be honest. All right, back to the other side, we've got Dark Side of the Moon, which is a very, very, very linear scenario, and I'm not going to say much about it. It's pretty much go to one point, do a thing, go to the next point, do a thing, and repeat this process. And also have good foot score, because you're going to have to make lots of foot checks, and if you get to the end of the thing, you need to make extra foot checks, and yeah, it's go from point A to point B making foot checks, and that's the scenario. I was really, really underwhelmed by Dark Side of the Moon. I think it's about as boring and uninteresting a scenario as you can make, and I'm not going to say much more about it, which gets us to the other side of the point of no return, which is very similar. Aside from, instead of go from point A to point B and do a thing, it's go from point A to point B, and then we're going to spawn 3 or 4 locations, and then you do a thing, and then once you're done with those, move on to the next 3 or 4 locations. Now, there's more push your luck stuff in Point of No Return, and it's generally a more interesting scenario of the Dark Side of the Moon. But playing them back to back is not great. These 2 scenarios just felt like filler. I don't have an awful lot to say about them. Point of No Return is more interesting than Dark Side of the Moon, but overall they're very bog standard, average, uninteresting Arkham Horror scenarios that are somewhat carried by the theme, and if you're not really into that Dreamlands theme, then they're not really that interesting. But they do get us to the finales, and the finales are very interesting. So Where Gods Dwell is blatantly unfair. It is a horribly, horribly unfair scenario. And like a lot of the scenarios on the site, it starts with this bullshit preamble where you've got to defeat this guy or trick this guy into falling or tripping or something, and then get past the gate and then actually start the finale. Because the finale really only has 5 locations. It revolves around the hidden card gimmick and getting the right hidden cards in your hand and then being at the right location to do the thing. And you're not allowed to communicate with each other where to go and what cards you've got, but you can swap cards between players. So there's a fair bit of, putting the card down and, passing it to a player because you assume that they've got the right thing in their hand to be able to get the right combination of a hidden great old one, plus the means to get rid of them, plus them being good at the test required. Now, the downer here is in smaller player counts, you get very less card draw to get through the encounter deck. And the encounter deck stays the same size each time. So it's just that much harder when you have a smaller player count to get the cards. There's also a few cards in here that just actively sabotage you. You can have the right combination of things and then just be like, no, that's not happening. And then you have to go through the encounter deck again. So yeah, Where Gods Dwell has this cool idea in it, but it's just not quite enough to carry the whole scenario, and it's quite an unfair scenario as well. So while I do enjoy it, and I think it's interesting and engaging and fascinating, I also don't think it's remotely fair. And the final scenario on the Waking side is the Weaver of the Cosmos, which is a showdown with Afaknaka. Again, this scenario has a preamble. You've got to walk down this path to get to the actual final reveal. And that's like the signature of the Dream Eaters, is the sort of core idea for this scenario isn't quite enough to make it an interesting scenario, so they have this little preamble that you've got to do before you get to it. Very, very odd choices. But this is cool. This is fun. It's not the hardest, although we did fail it the first time because we were just not kitted out for the fight at all. And the fight's neat. Like, visually, this is probably the best scenario for Arkham Horror, the card game, because of how they use Afaknaka's legs and the location being a giant web and the spider moves around it and how you engage with that. This is good. Like, this is a really cool finale. It's lots of fun. Once you know how to work it, it's not the hardest scenario or the hardest finale in the game by any means, but it is just kind of cool. And it really does touch off the difference between the 2 mini campaigns, because aside from 1,000 Shades of Horror, the scenario matching across, it's scored 3-1 to the Waking side in terms of who's got the best scenario at each step, because this is a better finale. Because Weird Gods, well, it's interesting, it's cool, uses hidden cards, but it's busted. It just feels a little bit busted. Whereas this scenario, I don't think it feels busted at all. I think it's just fun. It's just a good, fun arc. Almost like video gamey boss battle. So yeah, now for some final thoughts on the Dream Eaters. I'm not a big fan of this campaign. I think if it was 2 4-part campaigns, you treat it like that, then Dream Quest is very ordinary, and the Waking Side, the Web of Dreams, it's okay. But it's not better than okay. The finale on the Waking Side is really cool. The finale on the other side's not quite so cool. It's intriguing ideas, but it's a bit broken. Overall, as an 8-scenario campaign, it's really lacking. I think it's a lot of disjointed ideas, a lot of tourism of the Dreamlands. You encounter things, but you encounter them at the most skin-deep kind of level. You just touch things and then you move on, because there's just so much stuff to show you in a very, very, very tightly confined campaign. I suspect I would be higher on this campaign if some of the scenarios were a little bit more interesting, and if there was a lot more linkages between the two. If it felt like what you did on one side really did impact on the other, and if you felt like if you failed a scenario on one side, you were letting the team down. Whereas, I don't know, I never really felt that at all. I honestly thought we were collecting signs of how many tallies for Kadath and stuff like that. I thought that was going to impact the other side, not our own side. I thought our success there was going to set the difficulty for the other side. And it didn't eventuate. The most that we got back and forth was, I think, we got to decide which side got the cat symbol, which got the cultist, or the elder sign, or whatever it was, that represented the cat, which was a bonus in the chaos bag. And we always gave that to the Waking Side, because the Waking Side's just that much harder, like scenario-wise. Or at least that's how we were finding it. So yeah, I wasn't a big fan of the Dream Eaters, but Bad Arkham is still better than most other games out there. I'd much rather play through the Dream Eaters than I would an awful lot of other games out there. So, for me, it's not great Arkham, but that means it's still better than just about every game on the market. And I'd gladly replay the Dream Eaters campaigns. I'd probably pick another campaign to do first before replaying this one again, but I'm certainly going to replay it. Alright, so join us next time when we'll be looking at Edge of the Earth, which we've just finished playing through. And a reminder that 3 Minute Ball Games does not do paid content. Keep us independent by supporting us on Patreon. And until next time, ka kite ano, and take care.